My first few months as editor-in-chief were a whirlwind. I implemented new editorial guidelines, streamlined workflows, and launched several ambitious investigative series focusing on issues that directly affected our community. The Beacon started to gain even more recognition, its readership growing, its influence expanding. We were becoming a force to be reckoned with, a trusted source of information and a voice for the voiceless. Around this time, about 4 years after the original betrayal, I started hearing whispers about Amelia. Not from her, of course, but through mutual acquaintances in the industry. Her star, it seemed, was beginning to dim. The initial impact of her groundbreaking pharmaceutical expose had faded, and her subsequent work, while competent, lacked the same depth and originality. She was struggling to come up with new, high-impact stories, constantly chasing the next big thing, but never quite catching it. The pressure at Insight Ledger was immense, and the expectations placed upon her, given her initial success, were proving difficult to meet. Then came the bombshell. A new scandal broke, this time involving Insight Ledger itself. It wasn't about Amelia directly, but about another senior reporter who had been caught fabricating sources and plagiarizing elements of a story. The scandal sent shockwaves through the industry, and Insight Ledger, already facing scrutiny, initiated a sweeping internal review of all past and current investigative pieces. This review, I later learned, was incredibly thorough. They were scrutinizing everything, double-checking sources, reinvestigating claims, and analyzing the originality of every published piece. And that's when it happened. My pharmaceutical expose, published under Amelia's name, came under intense scrutiny. The internal review team, comprised of seasoned investigative journalists, began to notice discrepancies, inconsistencies, and an uncanny overlap with a prior, less published piece I had worked on, some of which had made it onto a regional wire service before I pulled it for my deeper dive. They started asking questions. Hard questions. Questions about the genesis of the story, the development of sources, the unique angles presented. Amelia, unable to truly explain the intricate web of my research, began to unravel. She couldn't adequately defend the originality of the piece because it wasn't hers. The paper trail, the digital breadcrumbs, the timelines of my own initial research that I had shared with her, all started to expose the truth that I received a call one afternoon from a senior editor at Insight Ledger. They had been discreetly investigating, and they had uncovered enough to be deeply concerned. They wanted to speak with me, to hear my side of the story, to see my original research, my notes, my timelines. I hesitated, not wanting to reopen old wounds, but I also knew this was my chance for vindication that I agreed to meet them, bringing with me every single piece of evidence I had meticulously kept over the years. My original research notes, audio recordings of interviews, early drafts of my pitches, emails confirming my engagement with sources long before Amelia had even started working on her similar piece. It was overwhelming proof. The meeting was intense. I laid out everything, calmly and factually, detailing how Amelia had systematically extracted my research, my sources, and my narrative structure, and then presented it as her own. The editors listened, their faces grim, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. By the end of it, there was no doubt in their minds. The fallout was swift and brutal for Amelia. Insight Ledger, fiercely protective of its reputation for journalistic integrity, couldn't afford a second major plagiarism scandal. They conducted their own internal investigation, verifying my claims with their findings from the extensive review. Within weeks, Amelia was quietly let go from Insight Ledger. They didn't make a public announcement about the reason, simply stating she was pursuing other opportunities, but the whispers in the industry were loud and clear. She was, for all intents and purposes, blacklisted from major newsrooms. Her career, which had soared so high on the wings of my stolen work, came crashing down. She went from being a celebrated investigative reporter to an unemployed journalist with a severely tarnished reputation. The irony was not lost on me. Meanwhile, the Beacon continued to thrive under my leadership. We broke more impactful stories, won more awards, and expanded our reach. My name, once overshadowed by Amelia's perceived brilliance, was now synonymous with ethical, impactful journalism. I was building a legacy, not on the back of someone else's work, but on my own dedication and integrity. Then, about a month after Amelia's quiet departure from Insight Ledger, I received a call from her. I almost didn't answer. It had been years since we had spoken, and the last few interactions had been filled with accusations and denials. Her voice on the other end was strained, devoid of its usual confidence. She asked to meet. I agreed, cautiously, more out of a sense of curiosity than any lingering familial affection. We met at a neutral coffee shop. She looked tired, defeated. Gone was the sharp, confident journalist. In her place was a woman humbled by her own actions. She apologized. Not a half-hearted, manipulative apology, but a genuine, tearful one. She admitted everything, acknowledging the theft, the betrayal, the years of lying and pretending. She said the pressure at Insight Ledger had been immense, that she had felt trapped, unable to produce the kind of groundbreaking work they expected, and in a moment of desperation, she had taken the easy way out. She had rationalized it, convinced herself that she deserved it more, that my work would never have reached its full potential without her refinement. It was a confession born of desperation, a plea for forgiveness from someone who had lost everything. She even asked for my help, suggesting that perhaps I could put in a good word for her at the Beacon, or recommend her for some freelance work. She, the woman who had stolen my dream job, was now asking me for a lifeline. The audacity of it, even after all she had done, still stung. But looking at her, truly looking at her, I didn't feel triumph or schadenfreude. I felt a strange mix of pity and a lingering sadness for the sister I once knew. The old Amelia, the one who dreamed alongside me, was long gone, replaced by this broken version. I told her, calmly and without anger, that I couldn't help her in that way. I explained that journalistic integrity was the cornerstone of my professional life and of the Beacon, and that giving her a position, even a freelance one, would compromise everything I had worked so hard to build. I told her that she had to face the consequences of her actions, just as I had faced the consequences of her betrayal. I also told her that while I understood her desperation, trust, once broken so fundamentally, was not easily rebuilt, and that our relationship, both professionally and personally, was irrevocably changed. She started to cry again, but this time, I didn't feel the need to console her. I had given her a chance to explain herself, to apologize, and I had delivered my truth without malice. I wished her well, genuinely, and then I left. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The weight of the betrayal, the bitterness, the silent resentment, all of it began to lift. I had not sought revenge, but justice had found its way. My unexpected rise to power, built on my own merit and integrity, had exposed her deceit and left her stunned and unemployed, while I continued to lead a thriving news organization. I still grapple with the emotional scars of her betrayal. The trust one once had in her, and in others, is still a fragile thing. But I've learned invaluable lessons about resilience, about the importance of integrity, and about the fact that true success is built on one's own efforts, not on the stolen dreams of another. So, Reddit, here I am. I'm not sure what kind of advice I'm looking for, perhaps just validation, or maybe perspectives on how to navigate the complex emotions of a sister who betrayed me so deeply, only to come back asking for help. How do you fully reconcile with the past when the person who wronged you is now suffering the consequences, and you are the one who inadvertently benefited from their downfall? Is it truly possible to forgive, even if you can't forget? My sister sabotaged my career and stole my dream job, but my unexpected rise to power left her stunned and unemployed. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am, seeking advice from strangers on the internet because my life has become a whirlwind of drama, betrayal, and unexpected turns. This all started about 5 years ago, when my older sister, Amelia, and I were both aspiring to break into the highly competitive field of investigative journalism. We had always been close, or so I thought, sharing dreams, secrets, and even a tiny apartment in the city as we navigated entry-level positions and endless networking events. We were both incredibly ambitious, but Amelia always had a sharper edge, a more ruthless drive that I, in my naive optimism, mistook for admirable determination. I had always been the slightly more creative one, with a knack for weaving compelling narratives and a deep empathy that helped sources open up to me. Amelia, on the other hand, was a master of strategy, incredibly persuasive, and had an uncanny ability to sniff out weaknesses in people and situations. We complemented each other, or so it seemed. We even talked about launching our own independent investigative team one day. The dream job, the one we both coveted above all others, was at the esteemed Insight Ledger, a renowned publication known for its groundbreaking investigative pieces and Pulitzer-winning journalists. It was the pinnacle, the kind of place where careers were made and legacies forged. When an opening for a senior investigative reporter was announced, we both knew we had to go for it. I had been meticulously building my portfolio for years, working on a long-term expose about corporate malfeasance in the pharmaceutical industry. It was a complex, risky, and deeply personal project, as my grandmother had suffered due to the very practices I was uncovering. I had invested countless hours, sleepless nights, and a significant portion of my meager savings into gathering evidence, cultivating sources, and piecing together the intricate puzzle. I was confident it was strong enough to make a real impact and, more importantly, impress the hiring committee at Insight Ledger. Amelia, meanwhile, was working on a piece about local government corruption, which, while important, lacked the national significance and the sheer depth of research that mine had. At least, that's what I believed. We shared our progress regularly, bounced ideas off each other, and proofread each other's drafts. I trusted her implicitly, sharing every detail of my pharmaceutical investigation, from my most crucial sources to my most damning evidence. I even showed her early drafts of the pitches I intended to submit to Insight Ledger, seeking her feedback and reassurance. The application process was grueling. We both made it through the initial rounds, then the interviews, and finally, we were both asked to submit our most impactful investigative pieces for a final review. This was it, the moment of truth. I submitted my pharmaceutical exposé, meticulously crafted and polished. Amelia submitted her government corruption piece. We wished each other luck, a little nervously, but with what I believed was genuine camaraderie. A week later, I received the call. It wasn't the offer I had hoped for. Instead, it was a polite rejection, praising my work but stating they had found a candidate whose unique vision and groundbreaking exposé aligned more closely with their immediate strategic goals. I was devastated. I cried for hours, feeling like my entire career had just been derailed. Amelia tried to console me, telling me that rejection was part of the process and that my time would come. She even took me out for drinks to cheer me up, a gesture I then mistook for sisterly love. The next day, I learned the truth. Amelia got the job. I was happy for her, truly, but a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in my mind. Her piece, while good, wasn't as groundbreaking as mine. I pushed the thought away, attributing it to my own disappointment and jealousy. Then, the Insight Ledger published Amelia's first major piece as a senior investigative reporter. It was a monumental exposé, a pharmaceutical industry scandal, detailing corporate malfeasance, unethical practices, and the devastating impact on vulnerable patients. My heart sank as I read it. Every single detail, every crucial source, every piece of damning evidence, it was all there. My work, my investigation. She had taken it. Not just parts of it, but the entire core of my years-long project. I confronted her, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and fury. She feigned ignorance at first, then became defensive, claiming that we had merely worked on similar topics and that she had developed her own sources independently. But I knew the specific, obscure details I had uncovered, the unique way I had structured the narrative, the very quotes I had meticulously transcribed. It was undeniable. She had stolen my work, repackaged it as her own, and used it to land her dream job. The betrayal was a physical blow. It wasn't just the stolen work, it was the shattered trust, the blatant disregard for our shared history, the cold, calculating way she had used my vulnerability against me. Our family, when I tearfully explained what had happened, was divided. My parents, always a little more partial to Amelia's go-getter attitude, tried to mediate, downplaying her actions as a misunderstanding or intense competition. My younger brother, however, saw it for what it was and stood by me, furious on my behalf that I considered legal action, but the complexities of intellectual property in journalism, especially when we had shared so much, made it a daunting and potentially career-ending prospect. Plus, the thought of publicly exposing my own sister felt like another kind of defeat. So, I walked away from the family drama, heartbroken and seething, and tried to pick up the pieces of my shattered professional life that I continued to work on smaller, less glamorous stories, struggling to regain my footing. The pharmaceutical exposé, now published under Amelia's name, haunted me. It felt like a part of me had been ripped away and attributed to someone else. I eventually moved to a different city, needing a fresh start, a clean break from the toxic shadow of my sister's betrayal. I landed a job at a smaller, independent news outlet, The Beacon, which focused primarily on local community issues. It was a far cry from the national prestige of Insight Ledger, but it offered a supportive environment and the opportunity to truly make a difference in people's lives. I dedicated myself to my work, pouring my energy into uncovering local injustices, environmental concerns, and social inequalities. I found a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet satisfaction in bringing light to overlooked stories. Over the next few years, while Amelia's career at Insight Ledger soared, propelled by what was essentially my stolen work, I built a solid reputation at The Beacon. I became known for my meticulous research, my compelling storytelling, and my unwavering commitment to ethical journalism. My stories, though local, began to gain traction, sometimes even being picked up by larger regional outlets. I even won a few local journalism awards, which, while not Pulitzers, felt incredibly validating. The pharmaceutical expose that Amelia had published continued to generate buzz, securing her promotions and cementing her status as a rising star. She appeared on national television, gave interviews, and became a sought-after speaker at industry conferences. From afar, I watched her success, a bitter taste in my mouth, but I refused to let it consume me. I focused on my own growth, on cultivating my own unique voice and impact. One day, an opportunity arose at the Beacon that I never expected. The long-standing editor-in-chief announced his retirement, and a call went out for applications for his replacement. It was a huge step up, a leadership role that would allow me to shape the editorial direction of the entire publication. I hesitated, feeling the familiar pang of self-doubt that Amelia's betrayal had instilled in me. But my colleagues, who had witnessed my dedication and leadership firsthand, encouraged me to apply. I poured my heart and soul into my application, outlining my vision for the Beacon, emphasizing community engagement, data-driven journalism, and fearless investigative reporting. I highlighted my track record of impactful stories and my commitment to fostering a collaborative and ethical newsroom environment. To my surprise and immense joy, I got the job. I became the new editor-in-chief of the Beacon. It was a monumental achievement for me, a testament to my resilience and dedication. I was excited, nervous, and incredibly proud.